Welcome to Body by Design. I'm your host, Blue Driver, a women's strength training and metabolism coach. I went from years suffering hormone imbalances, looking soft and bloated, to symptom-free and building muscle for a toned athletic physique. Since then, I've made it my mission to empower women to take control of their own health, hormones and body composition. So grab a cup of coffee and let's build your body by design. Welcome back to Body Design, everyone. And today I've got a very special guest, Stephanie Crasweller. I stumbled across Stephanie on Instagram, very much so after experiencing my own adrenal fatigue and cortisol issues and impact on myself. I really resonated with a lot of what Stephanie was saying. So I thought I'd get her on and have a chat and talk about the things like cortisol and progesterone and all those things that can really impact us in perimenopause and menopause. So welcome, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to start and tell the audience a little more about yourself, how you kind of got to where you are and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I've been in the health and fitness industry since 2011, so it's been quite a while now, which is crazy how quickly it's gone by. But I actually went to university thinking I was going to be a gym teacher. Like I always loved physical activity. I thought I was going to be a gym teacher, and then started working with some teens and I'm like, I don't think I have the patience for this. So anyone who's a teacher, bless your hearts, you have a very challenging job and we need more people like you. So amazing.
Yep.
But then I started my personal training journey and doing nutrition on the side right away. And I loved working with non-athletes. So I loved anyone who was general population, anyone that was dealing with like osteoporosis and cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, anything chronic condition-esque. I loved, loved, which led me to pursue my master's. And then I worked in the health region in my city, my area, and I was in charge of all the chronic disease exercise management programs. And all this time, I'm still training on the side. I'm still, doing nutrition coaching. And what I was seeing was there was this massive gap of being able to support people the way that I really wanted to. So then I got into personal training gym, started coaching other coaches and other trainers, but that still didn't seem like enough. So then I opened my own clinic and I got my osteopathic manual diploma. So I started my own clinic as an osteopath with personal trainers and massage therapists and very multidisciplinary clinic. And I kept seeing these women over and over and over where it was like, you'd have someone that was 200, 250, 300 pounds, eating like 1,200 calories. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like how is this eat less, move more not working? Like there's something going on. So then I dove deeper into metabolism and really understood that. And I was like, amazing. And I learned all these things, started applying it to clients and it was working great. But then still women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, it like kind of worked, but not as great. And I'm like, hey, what is going on? And I kept hearing all these stories from clients of going to the doctor and they'd be like, eat less, move more, cut your carbs, cut your fasting window smaller, right? Or fasting window bigger so your eating time is smaller. And all of these things, they just kept feeling worse. They weren't getting results. They'd gain weight super quick. And I was like, hey, what is happening? These women aren't getting support from the medical system. So I was like, I am determined to figure this out. So then I dove into hormones and metabolism, specifically perimenopause and menopause. The impact of stress really caught my eye because all these women were caregivers and taking care of everybody else and go, go, go all the time. And finally made all the connections.
That typical mum thing that just
Yeah, exactly. So then I started making all these connections and then really started leading and finally seeing the changes that we needed to really support women. And then I fully went online after closing my clinic just because the demand was so high. Now we've been able to help women all around the world. We've got people in Europe, we have people in Canada, the States, New Zealand, Australia, and it's been pretty amazing to see the impact that we've been able to now have. And working on writing a book right now as well, which is really exciting and
wow, exciting.
continues to grow. Yeah, it's very cool.
You've got some wonderful things happening. I love hearing you talk about how, the metabolism thing, but then you were like, but it's still not quite sometimes it's still not quite there. And I think through the growth of my coaching, I've seen similar things. And then obviously my own experience, which my audience has probably heard a fair bit about, but recent adrenal fatigue. And this is someone that was doing everything 100% right. I'm great with my tracking and my nutrition is perfect. I rarely eat out, doing all the things, training really well. and still something was going on in my body that just wasn't right, and I didn't feel great. Mine was probably spurred more from the adrenal fatigue than just general perimenopause. But there is, and I'm seeing that in my clients now, clients that we bring them in, we clean up their diets, we get them moving, we make sure they're getting the nutrition, we give them some basic supplementations, things like magnesium are really supportive. But then after a while you go, it's like 95% of people, if you clean up your diet and get moving, you're good. But then there's always the odd client that I have that's like, hang on, there's just a little bit more going on here. And I personally started diving down that path. And then obviously my own health drove that even more. And I'm early on in my journey in the functional space. But I spent last year studying in that space and are bringing that more to my clients now. And I totally agree around this it's like there's two sides of the fence in this world where we go, calories in, calories out, that's what it is. No, it's hormones. I think that it's a combination of both. And I think, both need to be looked at, because in reality, it is calories in, calories out. But if your metabolism and your hormones aren't working well, it could be 800 calories is your calories in, calories out place that you'll lose weight, but that's not going to help you. You're not going to get the nutrition you need.
Exactly. No, and it's very close-minded. Like people don't realize like it's important to have specialists. Absolutely, right? Like specializing in certain things, but the human body doesn't work that way. The human body, you cannot isolate things. Like whatever is affecting your hormones, like your hormonal imbalance is a symptom of something else going on in your body. So really figuring out the cause of those things, because the calories in, calories out that you've been following could very well be the reason why you are struggling so much with your hormones, because you're not giving yourself enough. And I read a crazy statistic today about the United States in particular, where the average woman tries 61 different diet attempts over their entire lifespan, which equates to about 17 years, which is insane. So I'm like, you cannot tell me it's calories in, calories out. Like that, there's clearly something else going on. And it's the fact that we don't understand how our diets impact us long term, how it affects our metabolism, our hormones, our gut health, our liver, our blood sugars, all of those things in tandem. And it is all so, you have to look at everything all together, and people don't realize that. And especially like they're like, oh, I get to my like end goal, right? And then it's like, boom, just go back to quote unquote eating normal. And it's like, you shouldn't have to go back to eating normal. It should be the same always, even in a fat loss phase, just your serving sizes change a little bit. You might incorporate more, low calorie, high volume type foods, but like the foods themselves really shouldn't change that much. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. Exactly. And it's the constant yo-yoing of doing these massive deficits. That's a huge stress to your body, that now like you've lost some muscle mass because you lost weight too quickly. You've got your hormones that are declining. Your blood sugar is like not doing so hot for most people. We're dealing with all these hormonal issues too. And then you're going back up to just eating like 800 calories more than you were before. But also you stopped doing your steps. Also you stopped working out. Also you stopped focusing on your sleep and prioritizing protein. So it's not even this slow increase in calories to like maintain your results. You have this massive change, and you've done this year after year after year after year. And then your metabolism is struggling so much. Then estrogen leaves, cortisol goes up, and now you're in this place where your body just really, really struggles. And it's like exposing everything that you were already struggling with before as your hormones start to decline. It's like they start to leave, and then it like pulls back the curtain. It's like, ta-da, here is all the things that we've been hiding from you all these years. Good luck. Like that's really what happens as our hormones start to decline in perimenopause. Everyone's like, oh, my hormones cause this. It's like, no. Your hormones hid all the stuff that was already happening. And now it's just really exposed where your weak spots were before, which a lot of people don't realize. So it's not the hormones' fault. It's what we were doing beforehand. And now we got to be more proactive to make up for the account that we don't have those hormones to support us anymore. That kind of makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. And perimenopause is very much, I think there's a very big narrative out there at the moment by some very big names that perimenopause is and it is a real thing, but it's being made out like it's it's something that has to happen in life and you should manage it as you go. When in reality, perimenopause becomes you can be in perimenopause without it being overly problematic, but it's problematic because of our lifestyle and our choices prior to this. And it's not even necessarily the women's fault, this yo-yo dieting, the narrative around eat massive. The one that gets me is eat clean, lots of broccoli, lots of salads, and have a bit of chicken. And I'm like, that's not going to sustain you. All that's going to do is ruin your gut because it's excessive in fiber. We need to put other things in there as well. And
Well, and people don't realize with the like eat clean, it's like you can eat clean and still do really low calorie one day and do really high calorie the next. You can eat clean and eat a really low protein diet. You can eat clean and not get enough carbohydrates to support your ability to build muscle. You can eat clean and still be struggling with sleep and still have the hot flashes and still deal with high cortisol. Like, yes, food quality matters. Absolutely. That's not me saying that it's not. But it's a very simplified version of what you actually need. And the issue is no one has taught anyone how to eat. And yes, it's partially our fault that we're here because we've made those decisions. We got to take responsibility for that. But also you made the choices you made with the information you had at the time and you did your best, right? And like, unfortunately, if you look at social media and you look at magazines and everything that's been happening for the last 20, 30, 40 years, you haven't been given the right information. So of course, how are you supposed to know better? Give yourself some grace. But now it's like, now we got to buckle up. Unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of time to like address some of these things for people. Like for some people, it's like 3 months, awesome, we can bang it out, and now we're able to go into fat loss. For other people, we're in a healing phase for 9 months to a year, which a lot of people don't want to hear. But I'm like, it's the only way you're going to get to where you want to be. So like you can just keep delaying it, or are you going to actually take action and like decide in a year, 2 years from now, I'm going to be a brand new person? Or are you going to continue to struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle until that pain is like so uncomfortable that now you're going to make that change?
Yeah. And then you're just further down the track and potentially more damage done too if we're not educating ourselves, right?
Oh, 100%.
And social media is in recent years has obviously exacerbated the, eat less, move more type narrative. But I think back to even when we were born, we were raised with the TV on with Jane Fonda. I don't know if you know Jane.
Oh,
Jane
yeah.
Fonda bouncing around, making you eat more and telling you to eat less and, all that type of culture. And that only has to be around you when you're a baby. And that's imprinting and creating your thought patterns and your programming and the way you view yourself. And even if you didn't have a mother that struggled with weight loss, you're still exposed to that from the day that we were born. So particularly the age groups at the moment, the 40, 50-year-olds right now, I think, once my daughter's 18, when she gets to 40, 50 years old, I'd like to think that there's a lot of different programming out there because we're starting to get the words out there, but we didn't have that back then. When we were born, this was all becoming the big thing. We were moving out of, the 40s and the 50s where, nourishing your body and having, a great figure was wonderful into having stick figure less. And we've been imprinted with that. So some of it is programming as well. And we've lost, like you say, we've lost the ability, that the art of eating. I love tracking to bring awareness to people, not as restrictive, not as something to be, obsessive over. But if you spend 6 or 12 months, a season of life tracking through all the things, when you go on holidays, when you do special events, even if it's loose tracking, you're seeing how foods impact your macros, what sort of things they've got in them. Particularly when you look into tracking apps like Chronometer, that's got a lot of the nutrition in it. It really pulls back the curtain on what am I eating and how can I support myself better to move towards a more intuitive eating style. We don't have
Totally.
to
And
track forever.
it's something that takes time and practice, right? Like everyone's like, I don't want to track, it seems so overwhelming, or I had a bad experience with it once. And it's like you're tracking for a different purpose now. You're tracking to make sure, am I getting enough fiber? Am I getting enough calories to do the things that I want to do, to heal my body, to feel good so that I can lose weight later on? As opposed to how little can I possibly eat and lose weight? You want to eat as much weight or eat as much food as you can and still see changes. That is the goal, not to starve yourself. And it's crazy how many women I talk to who I'm like, just track for a couple of days and let me know. And they're like, oh my gosh, I thought for sure I was getting at least 100 grams of protein. I thought for sure I was getting at least 1,800 calories, and they're at 1,000, and their protein was at 50 grams. And they thought the foods that they were eating were high protein, but really they were high fat, and they didn't realize these things. And it's not something you have to do forever. I mean, I'm a person who I'm tracking right now. I'm in my own fat loss phase right now. I'm in my deficit, and I'm only going to be here for 8 weeks because I really struggle past that point and my body will start to gain weight. Actually, if I drop my calories too low or I'm in fat loss for too long, because my progesterone and cortisol have been crap and something I've had to deal with for my entire life. And it's been a very big journey for me throughout all my 20s and stuff like that as well. And I really have to be aware, and like tracking helps me so much because, even in a fat loss phase as a nutrition coach who's been doing this forever, it's still helpful to have. And I don't track all the time, but in specific seasons, I track because it helps me, get me back to where I need to be. It brings awareness again. And it's good to track a couple days every here or there to be like, okay, am I actually like doing as good as I think I am? Because it's very easy to like slowly slip down, right? And that's where things go wrong. But if you don't have those tools, like you need to learn how to use that first, and it's going to take time. Just like you're not going to all of a sudden learn how to like speak Chinese. Like it takes practice. It
Yeah.
seems very overwhelming at first to try and develop that skill, but you get there. You get the literacy. You can speak it. You can understand it. You can write it. You can read it. It's the same with nutrition, but people don't see it that way. So
No.
you have to be dedicated to the learning process. Otherwise, you'll never get there and you'll never stick to it.
I liken it to, I always say to my clients, give it 4 weeks, especially when they're very overwhelmed. Give it 4 weeks and think about when you learned to drive a car, all those moving parts. It was like steer straight, stay in the lines, indicator, clutch, like all these things going through your mind when you're learning to drive. But I bet now you can drive to the shop, step out of the car and go, I don't really remember that journey because it's become so automated. That's
Mhm.
kind of where I am with tracking now. Often I won't track, but I'm still kind of weighing out my foods because I know that I need around 125 grams of a protein source. So I'll make sure I'm weighing it out. So I'm getting that. You learn to understand those things. But like you say, it's practice, and we have to do that learning process and utilize it in those different seasons in life through different times. Then it becomes a tool, like you're saying. I don't track all the time either. Only when I have specific goals is when I pull it in. Or if I feel like, I'm low in energy or something happening at the moment, I might just see what I'm doing. And then you go, oh yeah, my carbs are a little bit low at the moment. I need to bring them up. So it is a tool that we bring in and out. But in that, you spoke about your own body and how you're doing fat loss phases, but you have learned your body. So we have, even as coaches, we have kind of these parameters, oh, you can do for example, you might do, a moderate fat loss phase for 12 to 16 weeks. But can a person sustain that with where their body has been? So it needs to be adaptive. You need to be able to learn what your body can tolerate. But you mentioned that yours is has been a big cortisol issue. And I would love to talk today some more around the impacts of cortisol, whether it's emotional stress, physical stress from overtraining, nutritional stress from not getting the right nutrients, and people that is under eating and overeating. Overindulgence is a stress on the body as well, particularly when it's of not the right foods or just general mineral vitamin deficiencies. So they're all stresses that we can have. I think emotional stress and life stress is a really big one in women that I see of our age. You mentioned that you've been through a lot in your life, and that's something that you're quite sensitive to now. Can we touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm fine. I can handle it. Or life used to be worse before. Doesn't matter what you are perceiving because you can be stressed. Like your body's response to stress is physiological. It doesn't even need your brain to recognize that it thinks that it's in danger. Like you don't have to like consciously be aware of that. Your brain will just like trigger that response, or something within your body will send that message up to your brain. So you can be quote unquote fine. You can be like, I handle it great. I've dealt
That
with
was
my trauma.
me. I'll just keep going.
I've dealt with my trauma. I've been to counseling. Let me tell you, I have been to counseling. I have done all the things, but it's very easy to out logic that process, right? Or it's like, oh, like that's why I'm upset. I get it, right? But like your body still has all these like internal mechanisms to like send alarms to your brain. So it can be like negative thinking about your body. It can be just being around certain people automatically, like you had an experience with those people, or maybe it's an environment, or maybe whatever it might be. It triggers stuff. Maybe it's deadlines at work, it's family relationships, past trauma, doesn't matter. It all goes through what we call like your stress response system, your HPA axis, and your body will send signals from like the body to the brain, or the brain will like perceive it. And so basically what happens is when we go into this fight or flight high stress responses, we are supposed to have cortisol go up and then cortisol come down. And during that time where it gets heightened, like we can focus more, we're energized, like we feel like we can kind of conquer the world. And this is why a lot of people, when they initially start fasting, feel very like clear, very motivated, can concentrate really great. And it's because of this elevated cortisol. But there's a time limit to when those benefits end, and it just becomes chronic stress over time. So this is why fasting shouldn't be something you do all the time. It's supposed to be for like short-term things. That's something that's like really important to get through people's heads. It's not supposed to be a thing you do every single day. There is a purpose. You get in, you get out. It has a deadline. It's usually not very long. Do not like we do not do fasting with any clients. We've done it with 4 clients out of the thousands that we've worked with now, because it is not necessary. And a lot of people can't handle that. So you have this like underlying stuff where your stress response system gets like triggered very easily. So if you're someone who has a lot of trauma, who has dealt with grief, is always taking care of people, doesn't set boundaries, suppresses their feelings. Like, when's the last time you actually got angry with someone? When's the last time that you actually allowed yourself to like cry and get emotional? A lot of people close that off. And there are studies that show that people who repress emotions, who have dealt with a lot of stress, the grief, the trauma, all of those things are like 8 times more likely, I can't remember this number specifically, but are significantly more likely to experience MS, to experience thyroid dysfunction, ALS, cancers. Like they even showed in a study that smoking isn't actually causative of cancer when you look at like cause effect. The people who smoked who had high stress responses were the people who developed cancer. And just by screening like emotionality and stress, depression, anxiety, they were able to predict up to 75% accuracy before people got their biopsies back who had cancer and who did not. So it is wild how you can be like, I am fine. Your body is not fine. If you are struggling with sleep, energy, bloating that gets worse, you can't put on muscle mass. Hormones are very low. Blood sugars are super irregular. Like you're finding that everything makes you more anxious, right? You're struggling to lose weight. You are probably dealing with a stress response of some sort. And then we hit perimenopause and menopause. And then because estrogen and progesterone start to decline, it takes way less for our cortisol to jump up. Before we could handle a 9 out of 10. Now we can only handle a 5 out of 10. So what we were quote unquote fine with before is now completely overloading your system. And you're like, but I didn't change anything. And now I'm gaining weight. I didn't change anything. And now I'm struggling with the sleep. It's not because of the hormones specifically. It's because now the hormones have declined. Now it exposes cortisol to go completely unchecked. Your inflammation increases substantially. And that's going to increase stress even more, make blood sugar control even worse, which is going to cause that weight gain. But it's not the hormones itself, it's that stress response. So this is why it is so incredibly important for you to actually take time to get yourself out of fight or flight, get your breathing rate down, your heart rate down. You'll get a stress response just from scrolling, flipping social media. You know, like if you're watching the news, like you have to be so aware of these things. It doesn't mean you are going to be able to get rid of all the stressors in your life. That's not realistic. So you need to find different ways to buffer it, whether it's like through some self-care type stuff. And that doesn't mean massages. It doesn't mean bubble baths. It means maybe you're just like doing a journal. Maybe you're spending some time in prayer. Maybe you are doing some crocheting, some knitting, anything that brings your heart rate down, brings your breathing rate down to force yourself out of that fight or flight, to give your body a flip and break. That also means eating enough food, because if you're not eating enough food, cortisol goes up. If you're fasting, cortisol goes up. If you're cutting carbs, cortisol goes up. If you're not sleeping, cortisol goes up. And when cortisol goes up, blood sugar also goes unchecked. Now you start having insulin resistance, making weight gain even harder, because when there is insulin present and there is cortisol present at the same time, it literally shuts off your body from being able to release fats to get broken down and stores fat instead. So until we address cortisol, you will literally be screwed. Like, I cannot tell you enough. And you're like, oh, I'm fine. I'll deal with it later. Yeah, but if you deal with it later, it is going to take you so much longer to get to where you want to be. So, like, start doing these things now. Take care of yourself now. Stop the HIIT training. Stop the fasting. Stop the low carb, the low calorie, because all you're doing is further lowering your hormones even more, increasing cortisol and insulin resistance and inflammation even more. And that doesn't equal fat loss. So, the harder you push, the harder your body is going to push against you. And your body's not fighting you, it is begging you to
Mhm.
listen, to tell you to love it, that it's struggling. And yet you're like, no, the answer to my lack of sleep and poor energy and fat gain must be more exercise and less food. That doesn't make sense. Sorry,
No.
that was super ranty, but like,
No,
man,
it
I get
like I'm
worked
just
up.
sitting here going, everything that I am seeing and I'm working with clients on, particularly, I think the hardest one is the reduce your exercise. Even if you're not so, all of my clients are more strength train based. So even once they come in and we're doing more strength training, they're probably not doing a lot of HIIT by this stage. They're eating really well, but if they haven't addressed those emotional triggers where they're still not bringing themselves out of that fight or flight, and sometimes it means pulling back the training or modifying that strength training. That's not about growth and being strong and pushing hard in the gym. And I think that that's something, a lot of my clients are very much about, let's build some muscle, let's get strong. They want to be powerful women, which is wonderful. But we kind of got to put that on pause a little bit when there are some cortisol issues going on that aren't rectifying just through tidying up diet and getting general movement in. I do find most of the people that come in, by the time you go, let's balance your meals, let's start eating breakfast so we start bringing our cortisol down in the morning. Let's give ourselves balanced meals so we're not doing big insulin spikes and drops. Let's make sure we're getting really nutritious foods in and covering all the vitamins and minerals that you need. I'm a big fan of liver and oysters as a multivitamin. Get those into your diet and cover all those nutritional gaps. Eat foods that are easy to digest. I'm not saying don't eat a salad or don't eat broccoli, but potatoes and root vegetables and tropical fruits and all these things that can give you really nourishing, easy to digest carbs to give your gut a bit of a rest as well. But then sometimes there's just that little bit left over. And this is where we're talking about that emotional stress or just the inability to wind yourself back. And we need to bring some calm daily into our lives.
Well, and it's also about doing the things that actually make you happy. Like we had a conversation with a bunch of our clients, and I was like, what do you actually enjoy? Like a lot of us are now dealing with, kids leaving the house, and now you're an empty nester, and it's a big change. Maybe there's career changes too, and there's a lot of stuff going on, which is also a stress on your body. But also now it's like, who are you outside of like taking care of everybody else? What do you actually enjoy? Because like that will make you so much happier. And when you're happier, it's a lot easier to lose weight because now you start having all these wonderful neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine that actually help support fat loss, that actually help support hormone production, the lowering of cortisol, and getting things to actually work properly. And people don't realize how much your mindset can influence things. Like negative thinking increases your cortisol. Like they've shown this. So it's not even like you have to be this crazy, happy, positive person. Just decreasing the negative thoughts ends up being substantially more beneficial for you than just quote unquote being like a positive person. So there's so many things that we see from this too, because if we know that we're doing this negative thinking, cortisol's up, we also know that there's going to be fewer serotonin receptors in your brain during perimenopause and menopause. Progesterone and estrogen play a huge role in this. The production of serotonin declines. So you need to work so much harder to even be aware of this stuff, but people don't know. Like, if have you ever taken like a notebook and like made a mark of like a negative thought or like when you complain, people are shocked at the things that come out of their mouth. Like shocked because we're not even aware we're doing it.
Mm.
It's something like 70 or 80% of our thoughts are completely subconscious. We're not even aware that we're like doing that. Over 40% of what we do in a day is like habitual. We don't even know that we're making these choices and doing the things. So if you can't bring awareness to that, Like, of course, you're never going to change it. We think something like 70,000 thoughts a day or something insane. If the majority of those are negative, that's just like further reaffirmation and like, hardwiring our brain to, those are the pathways we use. Our brain, our body is lazy. So like if we know that that highway is open, like we're going to use that highway all day. It doesn't want to try and make new roads down the gravel roads or things like that, right? So it takes honest awareness and practice to change that, which can be really challenging. And this is why, like, oh, that's why I was upset. Cool. Like you have to dig deeper and like think about it often and like read things often. Like saying things out loud and gratitude and journaling can actually make a big difference. And I have a couple clients that have really pushed back on it. And I'm like, just do it. You hate it, just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And then it's like all of a sudden, like they change the way they talk to themselves. And again, it can be really uncomfortable, especially if you're not happy with where you are right now, but you don't have to love yourself in order to change. Like, love yourself enough that you want to change. You can love yourself and still want to change and improve and grow. You don't have to hate yourself just because you want to change and you think the person you'll become is better. Awesome. Love yourself and love yourself through the process. Love the person who you're going to become because we are so hard on ourselves. People are
Mhm.
so hard on us. The judgment these days is crazy. So, like, you need to do it for yourself, and then you can show up for your friends, your family, your career so much better. Because, have you ever walked into a room and you're just like, oh, I don't know what you guys were talking about, but I'm out. Like, this feels heavy. This feels gross. People are like that with you, right? Then you're like, oh, nobody likes me. I'm alone. No one wants to spend time with me. I'm not getting the promotion. What is the energy that you're like giving off? We've all been like that where it's like, oh, I don't really want to hang out with that friend because I'm just
We, we,
exhausted
we
after, right?
crave
It's the
that.
same
We
thing.
crave that positivity. And whether we
Hmm.
realize it or not, because there is so much negative in life, whether it's, being thrown at you through your news or your own programming,
Hmm.
you are actually looking for a way out of that negative. And if you walk into a room or you're around a person that's very low and complaining and negative all the time, you don't want to be around that. You're not attracted to being around
When
that.
it's contagious.
Yeah.
Like moods are contagious. You can go into a conversation, leave and be like, man, I feel so good and light and amazing. Or you can go into a conversation, leave after and be like, I need a nap. I feel exhausted. I'm not in a good mood. Like it is like it's contagious. So
Yeah.
like, would you want people to think and feel the way that you do? That's another thing to consider as well, because we always think about what we're exposed to, but like, what are you also, giving off? I think that's really important to like be aware of too.
Yeah. And that's not saying that we need to, never speak of our problems or anything like
Oh
that.
gosh,
We
no.
all have, having that person that we can confide
Mhm.
in and going through that. But I think it's having the space and the time to deload on whatever it is
Mhm.
that's happening. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to solve
No.
it, but we don't have to dwell in it and shifting our focus. We can acknowledge that something is hard or sad or negative, whatever it is that's going on, particularly if it's a life situation that you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have control over. You don't have control over it. But if you continue to put your focus in there and bring it up and drag it in at every moment that you have, then that's all you're focusing on. So you can acknowledge something and go, okay, acknowledge this is really hard right now, but then simply shift your focus to, but hey,
Mhm.
what a lovely day it is today. Just that initial shift to get your thought path into something a little more positive. This will be still be sitting in the background. If it's something you can't change, it probably will be sitting in the background. But if you let it sit in the foreground and dominate your thoughts, that's when you're going to be stuck. And it's like you get stuck in this. I went through some really, you wouldn't know my story, but I've just released a podcast and a lot of my listeners would have been across it. But we went through some really hard times. My partner got cancer a couple of times. The doctor, I worked at a hospital. The doctor that treated him actually ended up, it was negligent. Cancer came back. So lots of things happened, a lot of things that we didn't have control over. And I was doing all the therapy things and everything. But like you say, we have to want to change. And I think one day I just walked into her office and I was like, I'm actually just sick of my own story because I'd gotten into that hole. It had become my story of how terrible things were. And it wasn't until I had that realization that I needed to shift my focus from that and find a way to let that go, that things could change for me. And you need to find that way to shift your focus a little bit. Does that mean that, Dean never had cancer, or he hasn't had to have multiple surgeries to fix it? He's just recently been through another one, or that this doctor is still out there and really didn't get the justice that we should. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that any of that has changed, but I have found a way for that to be okay. This has happened, but what can I take from this, and what can I do to move forward?
Well,
Thinking.
it's like when you think about like, oh, I'm going to buy a new car. You all of a sudden start seeing that car that you want everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with literally everything in your life. And yes, we go through hard times. I've gone through so much grief, so much trauma, crazy amounts of things. But it's like, what can I learn from this? And like, how can I use it to like benefit me? Which is really hard when you like lose someone, or, have a really bad diagnosis or whatever it might be. It is really hard, right? Like, I will not deny that. I have been there, and it sucks, and it is a nightmare, to be quite honest. But also, if you keep focusing on the negative aspect of things, like that's all you're going to see everywhere, of yet again proof that your life sucks. Yet again proof that I'm not enough. Yet again proof that I'm not worthy. Yet again proof that nobody likes me. But it's like the same thing can happen if you focus on the positive, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm like blessed with another opportunity. Oh my gosh, I am blessed with this. And just how you can negative spiral, you can positive spiral. And it'll feel really weird at first because, again, our brain is so programmed to be like, trigger, now we're just mad all day. That light switch is turned on. Imagine if you could turn on the happy light switch instead, and then you saw positive in all the things, right? Or neutrality in all the things. But it's just the way that our physiology, our neurochemistry and everything is programmed, right? So you need to learn from things. And it sucks. I mean, I lost my mom super suddenly, out of nowhere, completely unexpected, also doctor negligence, which was devastating. And I mean, yeah, like I'm pissed off about the way the doctors were and they didn't listen. But you know what? To me, that was a lesson of I'm going to do things to help other women. I'm going to help people. Like, yes, it's not cancer specific, but like kind of by improving health and stuff on people, right? And making that link between the stress and how important that is. Because I am 1000% sure that the stress is what killed my mom. 100% is what caused these tumors to pop out of nowhere and take her
Dean is
life
convinced
in a matter of weeks.
cancer came up through stress. There was other stresses in life with his kids and court custody battles and blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
If you should read the book, When the Body Says No, you will be like shocked. You will read that and never look at stress again, ever. It's insane.
Right. I'm gonna get on to that one. I haven't read that one, but we do believe, that stress can, when you add stress into a body that's maybe not functioning well already, particularly, let's take women when we've just spoken about how they're putting themselves through all this yo-yo dieting and not nourishing it well. Then you add stress in on top of it. Yeah, Dean's absolutely convinced that that's where his cancers came from, and the reoccurrence of it, because his reoccurrence was actually quite unusual as well. But there was a lot of other stress. There was other stresses that created it, then the stress from the initial diagnosis and doctor negligence happening. And then we get into that place and you go, here we are again. And you do need to find a way to make a connection to a positive thing. And when we're talking about big things like, you losing your mother or what's happened with my partner, Dean, it's really hard to find that connection, but you have to dig deep to find a way to do that. One of the positive things for me, very similar to you, is I had already been studying nutrition. It was something just out of interest, but it actually drove me into the career path I'm in now. And I love what I do. So it's a positive that's come out of this, which we had to shift to. But yes, these things had all driven the cortisol. So you need to look at the emotional side. Sometimes the body needs a bit of a reset with some extra support, supplementation, some specifics around nurturing the physiological side of it as well. But you can't just rely on that.
No, it won't work.
Yeah.
Like hands down, just will not work.
So from a physiological perspective, to kind of shift the focus into other areas of it now, cortisol and we talk about our hormones are already going down in perimenopause. I know that there's a massive narrative around estrogen at the moment. What about the progesterone and the link with high cortisol and progesterone is one of the, it depletes the quickest when we hit perimenopause, yet there seems to be a vast majority of doctors that are reaching straight for the script pad for estrogen without considering other things. I personally had an experience and my estrogen levels were fine, but my progesterone, obviously because of the adrenal fatigue, and I'd love for you to talk more about that actual physiological link there. But the doctors are just automatically going to estrogen, and we're forgetting about how soothing and supportive progesterone can be for us in times like this, but at the same time, it's being depleted because of this.
Yeah, so with estrogen, like she's a bit of a drama queen. She's like the takes off her earrings, like hold my earrings kind of gal. She's gonna fight, right? Progesterone's like, well, let's calm down. Maybe like she really keeps estrogen in check. Like they're the yin and the yang, they work together. So you can have low progesterone, but you can also have low estrogen. But if progesterone's too low compared to estrogen, you start having all these symptoms. So you can have estrogen dominant type symptoms. So if you're just pumping up estrogen and not replacing progesterone, you can actually see things get worse. Low progesterone, like you can see heavy bleeding, you can have weight gain or trouble like losing weight, decreased sex drive, more mood swings, depression, because progesterone is the thing that keeps you calm and relaxed and makes you feel grounded. It helps you sleep. And people are like, oh, I must definitely be missing progesterone. Yes, it also, if your progesterone's too low, you'll have more like PMS type symptoms, breast tenderness or fibrotic breasts. You can develop fibroids. You can have gallbladder problems, which a lot of people don't talk about, low libido, the hot flashes, the migraines, the headaches, lots of things that people struggle with, right? And so, in order for us to make enough progesterone, first of all, we have to have a cycle and we have to ovulate. So, you can have a cycle and not ovulate. So, a lot of people are on like struggle with low progesterone way before they even go without like any missed cycles because you can have a cycle and not ovulate. So that's one thing. The other thing too is like naturally, obviously, progesterone is going to decline as we go through aging, right? That's just a natural process that our body stops producing as much. However, it is going to be still manufactured a little bit in the ovaries, a tiny bit in our adrenal glands as well. But if once our progesterone is completely depleted, we see that the adrenals like take over progesterone production predominantly. However, if our adrenals are so focused on making cortisol, progesterone cannot be produced. So what we see a lot is that women are already in this kind of stress state, and then progesterone naturally starts to decline a little bit. And instead of seeing this like slow drop in progesterone over time, you see this massive drop
Yeah.
because it can't be produced in the presence of cortisol in the high stress state, which a lot of us are in, right? And we know that when progesterone declines, we also see a lot of issues with like fluid retention, sudden weight gain. The other thing about progesterone too is that it helps keep our androgens in check. So now, if all of a sudden progesterone is low, our androgens can go up. And when androgens go up, we start having symptoms of like PCOS, which again,
Can
not
you
super
just
great. We start
explain
struggling.
androgens for those who might not understand that?
Yeah, yeah. So androgens are like your male typical hormones.
Mm.
So testosterone is like, I don't lump them with androgens, it's a little bit differently, but because testosterone has its own things, but it's the typical like male dominant hormones. So then when we see PCOS or androgens go unchecked, we start seeing a lot of issues with like blood sugar control. We start seeing like hair growth on our chin. We can also see like male pattern type baldness as well, even in women. We might see like hair underneath like the nose more. Weight gain is very, very common here as well. Lots of anxiety, things like that, because it again combats progesterone. And that can also have a negative effect on cortisol, and cortisol can actually make our androgens higher through this pathway as well. So you start seeing all these different imbalances that can happen that are going to contribute to a bunch of different symptoms. So this is why getting tested first and foremost is so important, because I don't understand when people put people on HRT without testing first. Because I'm like, don't you want to know where they are first? See how much it's increasing by, and then like be able to monitor dose over time so that you can like adjust that properly. Like, I don't understand why that's not like the standard of care,
Yeah.
which like blows my mind. But Also, the other thing too to note about progesterone is it's not the same as progestin, which is what's in most birth control pills. And so the effects of progestin actually are very opposite to progesterone. It looks like progestin or progesterone in our body, but it doesn't act the same way. So it doesn't actually like calm you. It can cause more anxiety. This is why some people, when they go on birth control pills, have more anxiety. They start having more depression. They start seeing the weight gain. They can't sleep. They start having all the opposite things that progesterone is supposed to help us with. So this is why when people offer birth control as a way to like deal with hormonal symptoms, I'm like, that's not good. Because this is what destroyed me and my progesterone levels was I was on birth control for a very long time. We're talking like 15 years. Yeah, 15 years. And for me, like, because your body's getting this synthetic version, it doesn't have a reason to make its own because it's like, oh, we're getting enough, even though it's not. And we know progestin can have the opposite effect of progesterone. So it's really just, it's wild to me that people don't talk more about these things because it is massively important. And now all of a sudden we're dealing with people who are struggling with fertility after the last 20 years. Same time as birth control became more popular. Coincidence? Probably not, right? Like, so it's just, there's so many things to think about here. And then you add stress on top of that. And it's like, stress is going to tank all your hormones. It's going to make your blood sugar worse. It's going to slow down your thyroid function, slow down metabolism, make muscle loss happen, even though you're working out. Low energy, poor sleep, depletes you of magnesium. We know that when you are low in progesterone and magnesium, you're typically going to see cortisol go higher, but you're going to struggle with sleep a lot. And when you're not sleeping, you see your hunger hormones get completely out of whack. We start seeing leptin resistance as well. Blood sugar gets worse, cravings get worse, energy crashes are super common. You don't have the ability to actually produce growth hormones. That happens at nighttime when you're getting good quality sleep. So then it's even harder to put on muscle mass. So it's just this crazy cycle of like one thing leads to another, and nobody knows where to stop the cycle. It's like, how do I make this stop? And it's like, have your breakfast, eat enough food. Step number one. Like that will help you so much. Work with your body instead against it. But if you don't understand your body, you can't. This is why I've been so passionate about our podcast and putting out all this free information because more people need to actually understand what they've done to their body, how their body functions before they make a choice. How does it actually impact me? And is it going to help me down the road or is it going to make it harder down the road? But people are so focused on the right now pain that they're more worried about that regardless of what's going to happen 10 years down the road, which I think like that's what you have to focus on.
What's your thoughts on there's a lot out there and there's some big name doctors really pushing that, and there is a lack in the medical industry of the understanding and the availability of HRT. So when I'm referring HRT, I'm talking about bioidentical that can be really supportive if it's used in the right fashion. I personally feel like there's this narrative that's really pushing women aren't getting what they need. They need HRT. They're in perimenopause. They should have it. And yes, they are talking about diet and exercise. I personally like to see my clients come in and we don't jump straight to testing because, again, most of the time, if you do some stress management, you get some sunshine, you set your circadian rhythm by getting out in the morning sunlight, making sure you're getting some sun on your skin for good vitamin D production, start eating those nutritious, easy to digest foods, getting great quality animal-based proteins into you, balancing your meals. A lot of the time, it clears up, even if it doesn't clear up everything, it clears up the noise. You jump straight into testing. Are you going to find something wrong? Shit, yes. You feel like crap, you're going to find something wrong. But if we get in and do the diet and the exercise and just spend a little bit of time cleaning up first, if there is something that your body is not naturally writing with that support and needs a bit more, then you can understand exactly what it is. And you talk about this round and round in circle, where do I go? That's going to give you a better idea. So I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but what is your thoughts around a lot of this narrative around this bigger doctor names? And I respect the information that they're giving. I feel like the perception out there is, but I'm perimenopausal, I've got these symptoms, I must go on to HRT, but they're missing the picture of the diet, the exercise, and getting that right first.
HRT won't make you lose weight, first and foremost, which is what a lot of people think.
Lovely.
And I'm like, it will not make you lose weight. That is not how this works. right? It helps with like some symptom management. So if you're in a place where like your exhaustion is like insane and like you cannot focus, hop on HRT right away. I think that's going to help because that will then help you, like if it's going to help you sleep, that's going to help you substantially because now you're going to have more energy and it's easier to, make some good food choices when you're not absolutely exhausted and dragging your feet, right? But I would say half of our clients are on HRT, half of them are not. Some people just don't want to, some people do. And that's a very personalized individual choice, right? So I'm never for or against it. It's a personal thing. And it's just you provide them with the education, you make the choice that's best for you. But we have a lot of people who don't want to go on it, or they can't afford it, or their insurance doesn't cover it, or they can't find a freaking doctor to prescribe it, right? So that's part of the problem. But the risks and stuff for HRT are pretty much all debunked at this point, which is like nice, right? There still needs to be, I think, a little bit more research just to, continue, right? That's always a good thing to do. But you will see improvements if you change your lifestyle and your eating habits. Like we see that in women all the time. They'll go through phase 1 of our program with us, just addressing lifestyle and nutrition and things like that. And they'll go from like 60 hormonal symptoms down to 5 in just a matter of months, right? For some people, it's as quick as 6 weeks where they start seeing these massive changes in their sleep and their energy and their bloating, and it's phenomenal. Yeah. But like, yeah, so there's probably like 50-50 are on HRT that we work with. But then we also do our Dutch hormone testing. And so I would say the majority of our clients do get that done at some point. For some people, it's like, okay, things just aren't quite working right. Like, let's see if there's like specifics in terms of detox pathways that we need to like open up. Is there like more specific things that can just like accelerate this for you? But a lot of people get it when they first come in, because if you can show proof, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, we solve this by doing A, this by doing B, this by doing C, compliance goes up through the roof because you understand more clearly why. And some people need that proof of like, well, do I really have to do this because I don't want to eat my veggies? Or do I really have to do this because I don't want to taper back my exercise? For the type A person or someone who's very go, 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 we find testing so beneficial because there is no denying you need to slow down and take a step back. And sometimes they need that on paper to like be the proof they need to actually make the change because they want to, but they're afraid. So if you can show them, hey, this is what's going on. Here's how we fix it. Here's the resources. Here's some videos. Here's some podcasts. Here's the research. It makes it so much easier for them to actually allow themselves to slow down because a lot of people are scared because they're like, if I stop the momentum and I stop, I don't know if I will be able to get it back. That's what they're afraid of. And, this is sometimes just the permission that people need.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And I think maybe what it is around the narrative I'm hearing is people are taking this free social media information, and the narrative is you need to be on HRT. So they take themselves off to a doctor. Half the doctors don't understand. So you're risking whether you're jagging one that actually understands or not. But then they're missing the piece. And though there is the narrative of, yeah, HRT, and yes, you do need to change lifestyle and nutrition, a lot of people don't know how, or like you say, the typical A-type person that doesn't want to pull back their exercise, or they're hearing that, you need to strength train harder, so I'm going to continue to do that. So they're missing what's specific to them.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
You need to, and you said it right at the beginning, first and foremost, HRT will not make you lose weight. It will give your body the ability to now shed the fat if you have some balance, but you've got to do all those other things to actually lose the weight. And I think I'm worried that some of the narrative out there, even though it's maybe not intended that way, the people I'm talking to in my DMs are thinking that that is the answer because there's not enough put on the actually have to look at life, not just food. It's a lifestyle. It is literally a lifestyle change. You spoke about it a lot in the beginning as well, about you can't just go on a diet, lose the weight, and then expect it to stay off by going back to the old things. We have to make daily movement, getting up and walking, not just, some people go to the gym, smash themselves in the gym, and then just sit at their table all day long working. That's not going to work for you either. That's actually really detrimental to you to be so sedentary. So there needs to be lifestyle shifts. And you're probably going to need some help to do that, because if you're at a point now where you're in such a big hole, it's because you don't have the information. That's not your fault, but you need to recognize that you probably need some better support rather than just the narrative of HRT is going to help you, because
Well,
it's
and here's
not
the
the only
thing.
answer.
Here's the thing too, is 80%, like these are statistics that are out there. 80% of graduating internal medicine residents, so doctors, do not feel comfortable or adequately trained to treat menopausal women. 20% of all OBGYN residencies even offer menopausal training. So only 20% of that specialty actually offers training in this area. And doctors receive less than 25 hours of nutrition training in school. You tell me if that sounds like those are the people that you should be going for advice, right? And yes, there are some that are amazing, absolutely amazing, and they love it. But how many doctors do you go to that actually care about menopause?
Yeah.
That are
There hasn't been a lot of studies that have included women in it because women are too hard and their hormones are too
it'll be 20 years from now. It'll be
Yeah.
20 years from now before that gets into actual practice. Because
Yeah.
like when you think back to like the whole leaky gut thing, people used to laugh. Doctors used to laugh at practitioners and nutritionists who were talking about leaky gut. Then finally there was funding for studies. Then the studies happened. Then you need other studies to quantify all the other studies. So there was big meta-analyses. Then it makes it into education. Then it makes it into doctors in the training who even care about that stuff. So we're looking at 25 years from when we start making noise about it before it gets implemented. So like you will not see these changes in practice likely for another 15 years, which is like, do you really want to wait until then, or are you going to do something about it now?
That's right. And you don't know, you're sitting in front of a doctor in his office or her office, and you don't know if they drag their ass through uni, even if the education was there. You don't know if they drag their ass through uni, drinking, partying, and just scraped through by the skin of their teeth, or if they were someone that was actually dedicated. Like you don't know how good their actual education was or how much they choose to stay up to date. So you are at the mercy of finding someone who is passionate about it and specializing in it is super important. And you don't have to be a doctor to understand nutrition and hormones.
Nope. We have lots of like menopause nurse specialists
Yep.
who have reached out to me for help because they're like, we've been taught this. Now I'm going through it and it's not working. And they feel terrible because the advice that they gave isn't working for them. So it probably wasn't working for a lot of their clients. So it's a massive thing that we're seeing, that people are finally coming to realize, hey, I don't know what's going on. And we actually ask our clients, like, if you're comfortable, ask your doctor, like, hey, how much training have you gotten on menopause specifically? How much training have you gotten in nutrition? And one of our clients actually did that, and the doctor admitted they didn't know much. And so she's like, well, do you think that like I should be like listening to you, or should I find someone else? And the doctor actually said, I think you should try and find someone else, which is massive for them to like be able to admit that they don't feel competent in a field, because a lot of people don't. And I don't think that's a response you're going to get from a lot of doctors, but like you have to advocate a lot for yourself, because unfortunately the healthcare system, I don't know how it is where you are, but for us, it's like you have to push really, really hard to get answers, to get tests, to feel heard, to feel validated, to, even feel like they're listening to you, right? So, and again, there are some doctors out there that are incredible and they are amazing. And if you find them, hold on to them. And I feel like there's more coming up now with like this new
There is.
generation of people who are like excited about it. But, like if you find them, hold on to them, refer people to them, because people need doctors that are actually excited about this stuff, right? So I think that's like a really big thing to push and even ask, because again, like a lot of people don't feel competent to be able to do that.
Yeah, and look, it is very much like that in Australia as well. I mean, I am very blessed that, I have the education and the understanding to be able to be prescribed the progesterone that I needed, because that was where I needed to go. It took a bit. So for me personally, I went to a doctor that I was literally seeing in regards to the stress leave I was on from the hospital. And when I eventually got to the point where I was like, well, I want this testing done. And it was like, I don't even know what half of those are for. So she would only order some of them.
Oof, that's a red flag.
So she would only order some of them. The cortisol for me was in that lot, and she did do it. I never got a phone call back from her in regards to my cortisol being low. and it was super low. Yet I was seeing her in regards to trauma, PTSD type symptoms, stress. She was the one writing the medical certificates for me being out of the hospital with what had happened. Yet that low cortisol was not flagged at all.
Well, and the thing too
It was
about,
all, you're fine.
yeah, see, and that's not okay. And especially the thing too, if you're getting cortisol done through blood work, it's also not great because like, if I would have gotten my cortisol tested in blood work in the morning, I would have been normal. But for me, what was happening was I did my like Dutch urine
Regulated.
test over 24 hours and then
Yeah.
it just stayed elevated all day. So like if I hadn't, taken things into my own hands and done the 24-hour test, I would have thought I was fine. When really the root cause of all my problems was that my elevated cortisol was just up all day. That's why I was struggling with sleep. This is why I was struggling with weight gain. Why my hormonal symptoms and progesterone were in the toilet. Like that's why. So you also have to be aware of that because a lot of people are like, oh, I tested my cortisol and it was fine. And it's like, no, blood
Yeah.
work actually sucks. Like you
If
need a 24-hour test. You
Yeah.
need it.
It can be a great starting point, especially if you can do it through insurance and you've got a doctor that's supportive. And if you, for me, there was a flag in there. Had mine come back normal, my next step was, okay, I need to actually look at a ZRT test to make sure that, is there dysregulation in there? I personally went and did one of those anyway. I'm like, yep, it's here. Let's just make sure what's happening through the day because you can start low and then peak high and then come down. So there can be a lot of different, it's a great starting point. But out of that, there was something in that blood test that the doctors did not see. And then, moving to the next one to going, okay, well, we can see that progesterone in luteal phase is like literally nothing. Is someone going to help me here? The next doctor was like, well, we'll put you on estrogen because you've got hot flushes. So hot flushes were extreme, like literally 4 or 5 times a night, waking up drowned. And I'm like, I can't. How do you resolve cortisol issues if you can't sleep? That's a big piece in it. And his solution was estrogen. I'm like, didn't even look at the blood tests. And yes, we can go down Dutch testing as well. And blood tests aren't necessarily the be all and end all, but it can be a starting point. My blood tests were pretty straightforward. And given my symptoms and my circumstances, it was very reasonable to be prescribing progesterone, but it was still, but hot flushes, it's estrogen that resolves that for you. So, and then it was like, I'm not going down the path of estrogen. It's fine. So it's like, well, the other thing is put you on the pill. I'm 48 years old and you want to put me on the pill to resolve this. So it took me multiple doctors. I'm just very lucky that I had because I have further education and I have that interest in it. And even for me, like I've said to you, my education is early on and this is a space I want to go more into. But this is what we're dealing with doctors. So it's very much the same in Australia as well. And blood testing, Dutch test, any of those sorts of testings can be financially out of reach, which is something that really needs to change as well. I got some blood testing done just to get the rest of the blood testing done was another $400 for me.
Yep.
It's huge. People can't necessarily afford that. So there's a very big gap in our system. Yeah.
Massive. There's like a massive gap with like being able to have access to things, which I'm not okay with because I'm like, it should not be this hard to understand what's going on in your body. Like you have a right to that. And I think it's very tough. Like in Canada, healthcare is quote unquote free if you can access it. And like even then you ask for certain blood work and they're like, oh, well, we didn't do all of it because it wasn't indicated. And I'm like, you can even pay out of pocket and they won't do it all, which is like infuriating because like there's like for thyroid issues, for example, they only test TSH. That's stupid. Like, because you can have hypothyroidism or indications of that going that way based on your T3, your T4, your reverse T3, your antibodies. But nope, we only test TSH, which is ridiculous.
I find over here more and more doctors are throwing in the T4 and the T3, which is great, but they're still missing the reverse T3, which although
at least you're getting that though.
We're getting
because
that.
Like even here we're not. It's insane.
But it's still a big marker that if we, they look okay, you're still missing the reverse, which can be quite high, which is obviously an indication of inflammation in your body and things happening there. So it's still, those things that are dropping off. And like you say, even if you request through a doctor, I'll pay it, they'll go, yeah, but this didn't come back, so you don't need it. And then you are at the mercy of jumping online, trying to work out what you should be getting, high costs, those sorts of things. So it is a big gap, and I'd love to see a lot of this be changed. And I think people like yourself spreading that word and helping women.
We're working on it. We're working on it. That's the goal. Yep.
And like I said myself, I'm not promoting functional nutrition for myself at the moment, but I definitely have some groundwork underneath me where I'm starting to help a lot of women within my practice already. And I really want to further that and be able to help a lot more women, and talking to women like yourself that have a lot more education on it, and putting that word out there has been wonderful. Is there anything else, a key thing that you would say out of this for women to take away?
Yeah, like the biggest thing is like, make sure you're eating enough food. Like if you message me, I'm sure if they message you, like we'll figure that out for free for you, where you got to be.
Yep.
We do it for women all the time. Eat carbs at every meal, have your breakfast, do actual resistance training, like lift heavy, take 2-minute breaks, prioritize your sleep, and like do that consistently for like a month, 2 months. Like you will be shocked. And if you're still not sure, like, what should I actually be doing? Like just message me, message Lou. Like
Yep. Talking to
we'll
people all
help
the
you out.
time. Yeah, they're really, those things are some really basic things that you don't have to be coaching with me for me to be able to go, hey, this is about how many
Exactly.
calories you need. So absolutely reach out to either. As I'm actually going to put Stephanie's contact details in the show notes, so you'll be able to contact her there if you'd like to talk more with her about it as well. But yeah, first step, get the basics in, ladies. And like you say, just a month or two. And then if things still feel amiss, start digging, because there is likely to be something more going on there. But thank you very much for your time today. It's been wonderful talking.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Wealth of knowledge. I've loved it. And yeah, so keep spreading your word.
Thank you.
So there you go, everyone. Show notes. You can get in touch with Stephanie. And if you've got any takeaways from this, please take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram at strengthtraining.nutritionist. Have a good day.